First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for having me here and for giving me the opportunity to discuss this beautiful paper, which I will start from the end. I liked a lot. So a brief overview. The paper, as Martin told us, is concerned with a very well-known problem of the design of optimal plans, which is the Killen and Prescott time inconsistency. So ex ante, making binding promises is welfare improving, but ex post is welfare improving to renege on these promises. So the standard approaches to address this kind of issue has been either to follow the Ramsey approach, so it is possible to make make commitments, and it is not feasible to renege ex post. And the other one is discretion, let's go like this, so the mark of equilibrium, so the binding promises are not allowed, so ex post reneging is not optimal. Of course, the first one is welfare superior because there are gains from commitment in models in which we have time inconsistency. So the paper maintains the assumption that making binding promises is feasible, so that it is possible to have a commitment in this setup. But highlights two features of Ramsey policy which finds not desirable. So like two motivating concerns. So first one is that short-run and long-run choices are different, even if the state of the economy does not change. And in some models, long-run per se, outcomes per se are not desirable in the sense that they might be extreme, like for example, the miserization result. And both of these properties have to do with the fact that Ramsey solution is not recursive. And to overcome this problem, the authors suggest and propose a different type of solution, a different class of solution, which still has gained from commitment, so it is good from this point of view, but distribute them in a different way with respect to Ramsey policy, these gains from commitment, and in particular in a way that makes the policy recursive. The focus, this new concept is what they call the recursive Pareto efficiency, which Martin explained us before, so that the choices are Pareto efficient in a given period T if there are no alternatives that makes all policymakers better off. And choices are recursive Pareto efficient if they are Pareto efficient for anything. So the bulk of this solution is to decompose the original problem into two sub-problems. One is the inner problem, so the optimization is made conditional on a given sequence of promises on future. And the second part is the outer problem, so the problem of choosing the sequence of promises omega. So going quickly to the results, the first result is to provide sufficient conditions for the existence of a recursive Pareto efficiency. In particular, some important conditions are that in the inner problem, which is to maximize the objective function subject to these promise-keeping and promise-making constraints, the objective function should be quasi-concave, while in the constraints the function h should be concave and the h0 should be convex. Then the second result is to characterize the steady state, in particular to see whether it is different or not in general from the Ramsey steady state. And as Martin told us, it is in general different from the Ramsey steady state. And the main issue is that the Lagrange multipliers on the promise-keeping constraints are stationary, while typically in the Ramsey problem they drift with a unit root. And this fact that the Lagrange multipliers are stationary prevents extreme long-run results like the miserization result. And this addresses one of those two motivating concerns that I mentioned at the beginning. And the third issue is the third result is about transition. So given that there is a steady state for the recursive Pareto efficient policy, then the issue is how to reach that steady state. And in general, there can be different transition paths conditional on the same steady state that can lead to the same steady state. And the sort of selection device is to implement simple policy that result in control variables that are time invariant functions of time t variables. And in this sense, it is also different from Ramsey because short run and long run choices are not different anymore. So if the state of the economy does not change, then the choices would be the same. Like, for example, in the example of the monetary policy, so since there are no endogenous state variable and that was deterministic model, so you choose a simple constant policy. So with endogenous state variable, without endogenous state variable, you choose constant policy, and with endogenous state variable, you have that convergence to the steady state that we have seen in the model with capital taxation. In some other example on the paper, it shows that with respect to Ramsey, this policy provides a lower expected wealth for the first generation of policymakers, so the time zero generation that sets the Ramsey policy, but it provides a higher wealth than for other generations from a certain point on in time. So going to the comments, I found it very interesting, and it sheds, in describing and in proposing this new class of optimal policies, it sheds new light on what drives some results which are pretty well known in the literature. And it also characterized the time inconsistency in a very elegant way, inspired by the Gropius-Sacchetti methodology, and putting all the time inconsistency in the outer problem of choosing the promises of future behavior, while leaving the inner problem time consistent. So I only have a few comments, and most of them are questions, really, that are related to three issues. One is about the motivation, the second one is about the applicability in more complicated models, and the third one is a small issue about some other literature on this topic. So starting from the motivation, as I mentioned before, part of the motivation is related to the fact that Ramsey policy might prescribe different choices in the short term and in the long run, even if the state of the economy is the same. And it is argued that it is not desirable. However, recently it has been proposed that this kind of possibility can be highly beneficial in special instances. Like, for example, the Eggerson and Woodford paper argued that when you have a liquidity threat, if you promise to keep future inflation for some time higher than what would be warranted by the state of the economy, then it might really help you in escaping the liquidity trap. And this kind of argument seems consistent with the recent communication by the Fed. So even if I see the beauty of trying to avoid this type of policy from a normative point of view, I wonder how costly it would be in some specific cases, like the liquidity threat, to renounce to this possibility. The second, going to the applicability, as in the Gropius-Sacchetti framework, the promises on future are state variables. In this case, not only next period promises, but also the whole sequence of promises are state variable. So the state space is endogenous. It's not primitive of the problem. It is more standard dynamic problems. And it is known that in more complicated applications, this can be a problem in applying the method. There are many papers by Marcel Maimon and by Messner and Pavoni and Litt on the recursive contra literature. In particular, in the literature, usually there are three ways to address this endogeneity of the state space. The first one is to use a two-step procedure, so first computing the state space and then solving the problem. Then the second one is to use infinite penalization, so to say that the value is minus infinity when the feasibility correspondence is empty. And it seems to me that this is the approach proposed in the paper, but my concern is it might imply that the value function of the inner problem, it might not be continuous in promises. And I don't know if you can pose some questions about the derivation of the other results. Then the third method is to use duality method, so to relocate the problem in where the state space is not endogenous anymore. So my question, given this introduction, is if these kind of difficulties that are very much considered in the recursive contract literature affect the applicability of your method when it comes to more complicated models than the examples that you showed us that are in the paper. The second question, comment on applicability, is that, as I mentioned above, sufficient condition for the existence of the recursive Pareto efficient require concavity of the functions in the constraint of the inner problem. But in many private information models, the incentive compatibility constraint show non-convexity. So this is quite a cheap shot, but I mean, it would be, I think, very relevant to enlarge the applicability of your method to try to see how if this concave requirement really bites, because in the paper it is said that these conditions are sufficient, but there are many instances in which you show that it exists even if the conditions were not met. So I think it would be relevant in the incentive compatibility case to see if this is the case. And finally, there is a JME paper by Damjanovic and co-authors who with a totally different motivation, develop an approach to address non-reversibility of Ramsey policy in an optimal fashion. They derive what they call the unconditionally optimal monetary policy. And in the case of this very simple new Keynesian model that you showed in the presentation, their method provides the same optimality condition as yours. So I guess if there is some more deep relation, or it's just a coincidence, a divine coincidence.